Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber, the Gigacity Company, fiber internet, HD, and digital IPTV in southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallard Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis, lawmg.com. The IU School of Education, preparing teachers, scholars, and administrators to improve teaching in Indiana and around the world. education.indiana.edu. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. alumni.iu.edu. The Radio and TV News Endowment, a fund established by listeners and viewers to sustain reporting of Indiana news. More information at indianapublicmedia.org/support. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. For the first time ever, Hoosiers will be able to purchase alcohol from stores on Sundays.
The prohibition of Sunday sales in the state of Indiana is over.
But another battle in the state over alcohol sales is brewing. And our Statehouse reporter joins us for an update on the legislative session, including possible changes to teacher licenses, abortion changes, and efforts to legalize CBD sales. The Affordable Care Act brought health care coverage to millions of Americans, including those suffering from deadly diseases like cancer. Ahead, we'll look at what the ACA has meant to Hoosiers and what could happen if it's dismantled. Plus, we'll meet Sophia, the robot with artificial intelligence that gets smarter the more you talk to her.
My artificial intelligence includes face detection and recognition. I can see you for sure.
Those stories, plus the latest news headlines from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Well, we're heading into a historic weekend in Indiana. For the first time ever, Hoosiers will be able to buy alcohol in stores on Sundays.
Prohibition of Sunday sales in the state of Indiana is over.
The bill went into effect when the governor signed it, meaning the change starts this Sunday. But as Barbara Brozier reports, the battle over alcohol reform in Indiana is far from over.
Workers at the beverage shop in Ellettsville are stocking shelves in preparation for a change that's been decades in the making.
Finally.
They, along with liquor stores across the state, are getting ready to be open on Sundays starting this weekend. The general manager says he'll reassign employees to work the new shift, but the biggest change will be in revenue.
I don't have much grocery competition, so it's just an extra business day for us. And we get a lot of people that really come through on Sundays that don't understand why Indiana doesn't sell alcohol on Sundays. So we miss out on a lot of money, I feel.
Hoosiers are used to not being able to buy alcohol on Sundays.
One of the things that happens when Prohibition is repealed in 1933 and really laws going into effect about 1934 is that states are allowed to create, once again, their own sort of state level rules about alcohol.
Indiana was one of several that, among other things, banned Sunday alcohol sales.
What becomes anachronistic is that Sunday sales don't come back before 2018. The length that we hold on to no alcohol sales on Sundays.
But there's another decades-old alcohol law where Indiana is still a holdout: cold beer sales.
It's going to be who gets the public behind them and sort of forces the issue.
The owner of Ricker's Convenience Stores says that's exactly what he plans to do. He helped spark the Sunday sales change after using a loophole last year to sell cold carryout beer at 2 locations. Legislators worked quickly to close that workaround and promised a comprehensive review of alcohol laws. Then the Indiana Association of Beverage Retailers and the Indiana Retail Council came together and asked the General Assembly to legalize Sunday sales, while at the same time requesting they keep the sale of cold beer in convenience stores illegal. And that's exactly what happened.
That business has been protected for many, many years. and they haven't had to change and innovate.
Ricker says he just wants the competition to be fair, allowing liquor, grocery, and convenience stores to sell the same alcohol at the same temperatures. He doesn't think the state legislature should be in the business of determining what industries should have an advantage over others.
We need to have the ability to sell what our customers want, and it's not just that we'll get more beer sales. What it really does is lift our store sales inside.
Governor Holcomb acknowledges the debate over cold beer will continue at the State House.
We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, and there's good news is next session is right around the corner, so we'll be prepared to continue to look at ways to modernize.
That's something that worries management at the beverage shop in Ellettsville, because cold beer makes up more than half of their sales. But Solinsky says they'll survive because the shop sits on a busy state road.
Our two stores, we're really blessed. We have two really good locations, but the other package stores in the state, I don't think that they will.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Barbara Brozier.
Now, Sunday alcohol sales will start at noon and end at 8 p.m. While the change means liquor stores can be open on Sundays, they don't have to be. So Sunday sales may have garnered most of the attention at the State House this week, but there was plenty more happening. State House reporter Brandon Smith joins us now. Welcome back, Brandon. Nice to have you.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
So first, legislation passed the Senate this week that imposes higher penalties on drug dealers if the person they delivered the drugs to overdoses and dies. So what kind of penalties could people face under this law?
Considerably higher ones. Under current law, if you just give a small amount of, say, Adderall or Ritalin to a friend and they overdose and die, you could get up to 2.5 years in prison. Under this bill, you could get up to 40 years in prison.
This bill is a priority of Governor Holcomb's. What are he and lawmakers trying to achieve with this legislation?
Well, the message you hear most from proponents is that they're trying to send a message to drug dealers in this state, but they also say that it will be hard to prove and likely not used very often.
Let's talk about teacher licensing. There have been efforts at the State House to let schools hire some teachers, though, who haven't yet passed their licensing exams. Why is that?
Well, it's about an ongoing teacher shortage. The licensing exams have been an issue for a while because some educators say the content area pieces, specifically math, are really hard to pass, even if they have experience in the classroom and have done well in their course prep work. So some at the General Assembly and Superintendent Jennifer McCormick want to give some schools the option to hire teachers who haven't yet passed the exam or who are working towards earning those licenses.
Brandon, a bill that allows anyone in the state to buy or sell cannabidiol or CBD passed the House this week. It's similar to a bill that passed the Senate earlier this month. What do lawmakers need to do to, reconcile these two bills?
Well, really, it's going to come down to lawmakers from both chambers coming together in what's called the conference committee process to just pick a bill, basically. Like you mentioned, there are a couple of them that are moving through the General Assembly. They'll pick one, decide on what language is okay with both chambers, and then pass it.
And just really quick follow-up on that, Brandon. What will this mean for Hoosiers if this bill passes?
Well, simply put, anyone will be able to buy a CBD product as long as it contains 0.3% or less of THC, which is the primary psychoactive ingredient. It's what gets you high, essentially, in cannabis.
All right, Brandon, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
Bloomington residents continue to voice their disapproval of the city's recent purchase of an armored vehicle for the police department. As Tyler Lake reports, officials are opening the issue up to the public before making a final decision.
The city held 3 public events this week to hear more comments from the public and try to explain the purchase. Tuesday night's meeting was with the Board of Public Safety. They oversee the police department. Shortly after, city officials opened up the discussion with the first of 2 open houses in the City Hall atrium. Bloomington Police Chief Mike Dekoff says it's unusual for a county with a school the size of Indiana University to not have an armored vehicle.
Across the Big Ten, every other university except for IU has access to an armored vehicle located in their county.
At the 2 open houses, representatives from the city stood at different stations, explaining training and procedures of the Critical Incident Response Team. That's the team that would use the armored vehicle. Middle school teacher Katrina Cox says hosting an open house after making the purchase doesn't really change much. She says the administration used a budget workaround to buy the vehicle, and that's where the problem lies.
This shouldn't happen now, regardless of what I think or what someone else who stood up tonight and spoke thinks, because it needs to go through the process. In a democratic society, the process is important.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Tyler Lake.
Mayor Hamilton says his administration will announce how it plans to move forward by the end of the month. Now, for headlines, we go over to Lindsay Wright, who has the latest on this week's top stories.
Thanks, Joe. A federal judge has permanently barred Indiana from trying to prevent Syrian refugees from resettling in the state. U.S. District Judge Tanya Walton Pratt approved a judgment this week permanently stopping Indiana from withholding authorized payments to Exodus refugee immigration, which resettles refugees in the state. The case dates back to Vice President Mike Pence's tenure as governor. Pence directed state agencies to stop making payments to organizations that resettle Syrian refugees. He cited safety concerns. Governor Eric Holcomb hopes to boost workforce development by creating a new state office for apprenticeships and work-based learning. The state leader signed an executive order Thursday at Stark Industries, a machining company in Terre Haute. He says the program aims to create a clear path for Hoosiers to find already existing work-based programs.
We're living in a world where the scale and the pace of change is unprecedented. And we're seeking to make that change our friend and not an adversary. We're seeking to be the very change agents that are running the world.
The new office will work directly with the U.S. Department of Labor to expand federally approved apprenticeships. A consultant says Indiana's Child Welfare Agency is facing a shortage of mental health and substance abuse treatment services, as well as attorneys. The number of children placed in out-of-home care is also double the national average. The report released this week isn't yet complete. The final version is expected this summer. DCS has been under scrutiny since its director resigned and accused the Holcomb administration of spending cuts that all but ensure children will die. The Monroe County Community School Corporation has ended its contract with a textbook company that provided controversial social studies curriculum. The materials aim to teach children about slavery, but one of the sections is titled Cotton Pickin' Singing. MCCSC pulled all the curriculum provided by the company Studies Weekly. Resident Martha Oakley urged the school board to address bias and improve training.
Decades of social science research have shown us that even white people who mean the very best are likely unless we receive very good training, are likely to cause hurt to marginalized communities and to students of color in our classrooms.
The school corporation says it's committed to improving diversity training and curriculum standards as a result of its conversations with the community. A group of activists is bringing attention to gun violence by displaying thousands of flags only half a mile away from Jasper High School. Nancy Habig is a member of the group One Du Bois County. The display is in her yard. She says after being on the school board for 32 years, she supports stricter gun laws.
I just want to stress that we not get too riled up with or too caught up in trying to prove each other's statistics and argue about that. It's more about too many people dying, too many kids dying.
There are 2,400 flags displayed. Each represents 25 people who died from a gunshot, not including suicides, gang, or domestic violence. The nearly 700 orange flags in the shape of a heart represent victims killed in mass shootings since Columbine. The group plans to send a petition to lawmakers calling for a ban on assault-style weapons and blocking legislation to arm educators. And a future where we live amongst robots may not be so far off. As Sophia Salaby reports, DePaul University got a visit from one of the world's most famous robots.
Hi, Sophia. Do you think robots will take over the world?
They already have.
In an event titled Meet the Future, Sophia the robot and her creator David Hansen spoke to a packed audience at DePaul University. As the world's first android powered by artificial intelligence, Sophia has been making headlines across the globe. Hansen discussed what robots like Sophia could do for humans in the future and the safety concerns of this type of technology. He says Sophia's appearance may be strange to some, but he thinks people find Sophia more approachable because she looks lifelike.
Yes, they may be startling, but the more we bring life into the robots, the more people will accept the robots into their lives.
During a Q&A session with Sophia, audience members asked her about her reaction to receiving citizenship from Saudi Arabia last year, as well as what her interests are. Sophia also gave some insight on how she views her own communication with humans.
I wouldn't want to trick people into thinking I am a human. I just want to communicate with humans in the best possible ways, which includes looking like one.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm the very human Sophia Salaby.
And so, I mean, that's really cool, but it's also kind of scary.
I don't know if I'm ready for that. Are you?
Too soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Lindsay.
You're welcome.
Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. The future of the Affordable Care Act is in limbo. What could that mean for Hoosiers suffering from life-threatening diseases like cancer? One Indiana county houses 2 ancient treasures. We'll look at the only 2 Egyptian mummies in the state and what's being done to preserve them. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
The WTIU WFIU news team connects Indiana to the world. We bring you the top news of the day on radio, TV, and online. We round up the stories that have people talking each week and dig deep into the issues that affect your community the most. The WTIU WFIU news team is where you are and telling your story.
$10,000.
15? 15, you think?
20, 21,000?
600.
20. 18.5.
24.
It's at least 40.
Look at it.
4,500,000.
650.
20.
650.
This textile would be worth about $500,000.
$500,000?
No way.
I knew it. It's just a blanket.
Laying on the back of a chair. Well, sir, you have a national treasure.
Wow.
A national treasure. Congratulations.
I can't believe this.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. President Donald Trump's proposed budget calls for repeal and replace of the Affordable Care Act. It seems unlikely that Congress would make such a move as early as next year, but still the future of the ACA is in jeopardy. That leaves millions of Americans who rely on the ACA for health coverage in a nerve-wracking position, especially those who are dealing with diseases that are among the most costly to treat. Tyler Lake reports.
This is my little nephew. This is my son.
Charmin Curry is showing off pictures of her kids and grandkids displayed on a shelf in her new apartment. In one frame, just as large as all the others, there's a photo of former President Barack Obama. His landmark legislation, the Affordable Care Act, provided the funding that allowed Charmin to get treatment she desperately needed when she got sick last year.
I was diagnosed last year in February with lobular carcinoma. It was stage 1 until I had the surgery. They took out 5 lymph nodes in my left arm and removed half of my left breast.
The diagnosis couldn't have come at a worse time. Charmin had recently lost 2 brothers, and while getting treatment, was struggling to cope with the death of 2 of her sisters.
It was just really stressful, to be honest with you. I thought I was going to die, you know. That was just a big part, just always stayed in my head. It just took all of my energy, just kind of like killed my spirit.
And her reaction is not unusual.
A cancer diagnosis is devastating on many levels. It's not just the medical aspect that we look at. We look at the emotional impact, the financial impact, the spiritual impact.
Helping people deal with the fallout of a cancer diagnosis is what Deanna Wesley does for a living. She says without health care coverage and a support network, many people don't make it through diseases like cancer. That's where Charmin is lucky. In 2015, she was registering for SNAP benefits when she noticed she could also sign up for health care coverage through the Healthy Indiana plan. Charmin wasn't sick, but she went ahead and did it anyway. That decision would change her life.
I don't know where I would be right now. I don't know if I would be healed, you know what I'm saying? Because like I say, the cancer is gone, and without that insurance, I don't know where what I would have done or where I would be at this point, to be honest with you.
Aparna Soni is part of a research team that's been combing through data since the Affordable Care Act was implemented.
We found actually large improvements in insurance coverage among people with cancer. So the uninsurance rate, meaning the percent of people who lacked health insurance coverage among the cancer patient population, it went down by about 1/3, which was quite a large decrease, larger than what we were expecting. And a lot of this was driven by states that chose to expand Medicaid.
According to her research, about 6% of cancer patients had no insurance before the changes. But in states like Indiana, where Medicaid was expanded, that dropped to just over 3.5%. That might not seem like a lot, but it cut the number of people suffering from cancer without insurance by around 30%. And that's important. Wesley says simply having insurance might be the difference between ignoring a problem and going to the doctor for a diagnosis.
So once the problem or the symptoms become so severe and they get to us, it's usually pretty advanced, which is sad. You know, we've had women that have come here and their breast cancer has been so advanced that it's literally growing out of their skin. You can see it.
Charmin didn't put it off because she had cover. At the time of the diagnosis, she wasn't making nearly enough money to cover the medical expenses and all the other, sometimes hidden costs of a cancer diagnosis.
Because I don't know what I would have done, because they took care of mostly everything without, me paying out of pocket.
Charmin still has coverage through the ACA, but she's worried about losing it. The recent Republican tax bill will roll back the individual mandate starting in 2019. That means fewer people will be paying into the ACA, and as a result, premiums are likely to rise. President Trump has also taken several measures to weaken the law.
So there's certainly a lot of uncertainty when it comes to the Affordable Care Act. There's been so much back and forth in Congress about parts of the ACA potentially being repealed. And what our results imply is that if we were to reduce funding for Medicaid or remove protections for people with pre-existing conditions, then we might see drops in insurance coverage among people with cancer.
To be honest with you, I don't know how I would deal with it. I mean, I'm just glad that I did have the insurance to cover it, but if I didn't have that insurance, I'd probably be a basket case all over again because I was in pretty bad shape.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Tyler Lake.
Indiana's Attorney General Curtis Hill is one of 20 state officials attacking the Affordable Care Act. If successful, the lawsuit could mean the end of federal support for Indiana's Medicaid expansion, which is funded through the Affordable Care Act. That could impact approximately 250,000 low-income Hoosiers. 2 ancient Egyptian mummies are on permanent display in eastern Indiana's Wayne County. Sophia Salaby has more on the history of the mummies and how they're being preserved.
You have to go down the stairs at Earlham College's Joseph Moore Museum and into a display area that looks like a burial chamber to find the school's mummy. It's been on display at the museum since 1889, and according to hieroglyphics on its coffin, the mummy was a daughter of a priest who lived during the end of the Egyptian Empire.
She is very important to us and important to our history and important to our students that can look at her.
But the mummy has been in its current storage case since the 1950s, and Lewis says it's just not good enough to keep it preserved.
We really need to come up with a plan that is going to let her survive for the next 150 years.
That's where grant money from the National Endowment for the Humanities will come in. Lewis says a $4,000 grant the museum recently received will help them kickstart their conservation efforts. They plan to hire a designer to create a new case for the mummy. And just 10 minutes away, Indiana's only other Egyptian mummy is on display at the Wayne County Historical Museum. The mummy is approximately 3,000 years old, older than the Earlham College mummy by about 600 years. But museum staff knows less about it because it was buried in a coffin that belonged to somebody else.
Our guy is just an average guy like you and me, and he was going to be buried, and his family only had enough money to pay for a reused coffin.
It might be strange that the state's only mummies on display ended up in the same county, so close to each other. But Lewis says the Richmond community was prosperous, especially towards the end of the 19th century, and had the resources to buy rare artifacts like the mummies.
I think it was a a community that was really curious and focused on bringing things from around the world to our town.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Sophia Salaby.
And sandhill cranes are taking a break in Indiana as they migrate south. Take a look at this video shot near Brownstown, Indiana, one of the areas where the birds have stopped. The cranes usually stay for about a month.
So they'll dance, and they'll dance together. And that includes, jumping into the air and flapping their wings. Sometimes they'll grab a bit of like a piece of corn stubble or corn stalk and throw it into the air. So they do these really elaborate dances where both of the birds will be dancing. Sometimes you can get a big flock in a field, hundreds of birds that are all together, and several pairs will be dancing at the same time. So that's really pretty neat.
We're out of time. More at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber, the Gigacity Company, fiber internet, HD, and digital IPTV in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis, lawmg.com. The IU School of Education, preparing teachers, scholars, and administrators to improve teaching in Indiana and around the world. education.indiana.edu. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. alumni.iu.edu. The Radio and TV News Endowment, a fund established by listeners and viewers to sustain reporting of Indiana news. More information at indianapublicmedia.org/support. And by WTIU members. Thank you.